Patrick Bet David had Sam Seder as a guest on the Patrick Bet David show, and there was an intense debate revolving Sam Seder's proposal for a 90% marginal tax rate. You can imagine that Patrick Bet David and Sam Seder didn't quite agree with each other. They didn't see eye to eye, and they do get into it. Let's take a quick look at some of the clips here. I'll interject every now and then with some thoughts.
Money was so freaking cheap for so long that we have to pay a price for it. And now you're looking at the economy. It looked like everything was good, but a big part of it was fake, Sam. We had a lot of fake success the last few years.
Well, I mean, look, I'm just measuring on, again, the way I view things is what's going to make things better for the most amount of people. And in terms of like, you know, it being in favor of the capitalists, I would also change our tax policy. So, I mean, I would claw some of that back, quite a bit of it back.
What would you do?
I would return to the tax policy when we had the greatest, sort of the widest economic expansion shared by more people as a percentage of our population than any other time in this country, which was in the 50s and the 60s. And I would return to the tax rates more or less there. So your top tax rate at that time was 90%, top marginal rate, for every dollar over $470,000 you would earn. So that would be equivalent to around $3 million today. I think we should return to that type of tax
You want it
scheme.
to go as high as 90% at the top marginal tax
At the top marginal tax rate. So understand, like, that only kicks in with every dollar above $3 million.
I hear you. And yeah, I mean, that's the famous Reagan situation where I think it was anything over $200,000 at that point. This might have been in the 40s, that he would only do 2 movies a year because you get paid $100,000 per movie, and then he wouldn't even do a third movie because he would only get 10% of the revenue because he's like, fuck it, I'm not doing another movie.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that curb growth?
When Reagan started telling that story, you know who he was working for when he started telling that story, right? He was going around, I think it was for working for GE, trying to convince people not to get Medicare for all. I mean, if Reagan could have gotten 3 movies or 5 movies, he would have done it. He was working with chimps. He would have been happy to do that for his career, believe me.
I think Sam Seder is right about this, and Medicare is easily one of the most popular programs we have in the country, and the only people against it are right-wingers and other pundits like Patrick Bet David. The vast majority of other Americans love Medicare and don't view it as socialism at all.
Smart with your money and just being wasteful. The government is clearly fucking wasteful. Where you are correct is that most retirees and most Americans do appreciate Social Security, do appreciate the entitlement programs that come with this country, whether it's Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, no doubt. But that doesn't mean the government is good at spending money. We're seeing that Social Security is about to go bankrupt.
The trust fund is going to be
the trust fund by 2023. And yes, I just had this conversation literally 2 days ago in D.C. where he kept using the word bankrupt, bankrupt, bankrupt. I said, what does that mean?
Who kept using that word?
This was
Which Republican used it?
It wasn't even a Republican. He was sort of a Social Security financial advisor, expertise type of guy. But I said, what do you keep saying bankrupt? Is that meaning that retirees will not be receiving benefits? He goes, no, they'll probably be slashed by 25%. You use 20. So we can, cut the baby in half here. But how familiar are you with the 3-legged stool of retirement?
Of course, yes.
Okay, so it used to be you had 3 avenues to retire. You had pensions, which do they even exist anymore for 90% of people?
More as a defined contribution than defined.
They're not very popular these days. I don't know how many people here have pensions. You have Social Security, which was never meant to be a retirement program. It was an insurance policy if you live too long, which basically Americans are now. Or you have your personal savings, which is the 401k. We can argue the merits of 401ks and Roth IRAs, what have you. But Social Security should not be keeping Americans afloat for 30 years of their life.
Well, that's the failure of the private industry, isn't it?
Why is it a failure of the private industry?
Well, I mean, Social Security is maintained. The idea that we're leaning on the government stool because the other two have failed. That's a function of the private industry.
Isn't that a function of just the average person understanding how money works and saving money, investing and doing it properly versus the government or institutions?
60% of the country lives paycheck to paycheck. How are they supposed to save this money?
And that is a good point by Sam Seder. If all of someone's money is going into things like grocery, rent, childcare, medical bills, how are they supposed to save money to retire? There are millions of Americans who would go into financial ruin if an emergency of like $1,000 or more was sprung up onto them. How are these people supposed to save if they're living paycheck to paycheck?
Well, how are they spending their money, I guess, is the biggest question. How many people have credit card debt? How many people? You just said when you took out a mortgage, you said, I'm an actor. What was the rate? You're like, I don't fucking even know. You should know.
Well, I was making so much money that
I don't give a shit how much money you're
guy,
making, Sam. You should know what your mortgage rate is.
But, I mean, I didn't remember what it was in 1998, but I mean, I know what it is now. But I mean, but I was making so much money, but I was making, I was in the top, I don't know if I was in the top 1% at that time, but probably pretty close.
So let me ask you a question.
And
then.
I was a single guy who had just gone from making, to $22,000 a year to all of a sudden making that
How much were you
less
making
than a week.
at that point?
I mean, I was making a lot of money.
Now, how comfortable at that point would you have been paying 90% in taxes?
Sure.
So you actually want to pay 90% in tax?
No.
So what Sam Seder is saying is you would be taxed up to a certain rate up to $3 million, and it would be 90% of anything over that $3 million. There is no place in America where you can live where you'll be struggling to make ends meet or not be able to pay the mortgage or put food on your table making $3 million a year. When MAGA talks about Make America Great Again, they're thinking about that era from the 40s to the 70s where the United States built the greatest middle class the world has ever seen. We had corporations thriving. There were still rich people. We had a high tax rate, but people didn't flee the country. They built and ran businesses. They lived their lives with a top marginal tax rate near or at 90%. Deflecting and saying it would lead to communism or ruin the country or whatever just comes across half-hearted and kind of disingenuous, if you ask me.
No. Let's
Why
be
would you want
clear.
that?
I think it should be 90% over for the every dollar you make over $3 million.
Yeah.
That would not have impacted me at that time. But I would have been happy to pay more taxes.
But why would anyone want to?
You know why I'm laughing? Because it's always let's tax the people a little richer than me. It's always let's tax the guys
it was
that
a lot richer.
Well,
But I'm just going back.
If you're saying 20,
I'm just going back.
If you're saying 22 a week, you were making $1,098,000. That's a lot of money.
No. Well, it wasn't 20.
You said 22 a week. That's $1 million a year.
No. That was the year before. I mean,
But you're making money. Let's just.
He said he made $22,000 in a year.
I was making a bunch of money.
But
I'm just going back to when we had the Great Compression, which was when we had the least wealth inequality in this country. Mm-hmm. We had the GDP was, consistent with where, on our trajectory, but it was spread out. It wasn't like this. Essentially,
Rob,
it was more spread out. It's called the Great Compression. And I'm just using that figure. I mean, look, if it's going to be 85% over 3 million or 85% over 4 million, I'm just basing it on what was the most successful economic era of this country.
Why not do 90% over $250,000?
I mean, if the numbers bared out, I'm agnostic as to that. Again, I'm just pegging it on when we had the most success in this country in terms of our economy.
I appreciate that you're pointing out the success, but right now the top marginal tax rate federally is 37, 39. Okay, you do realize how shocking it is to say, all right, rather than go from 37 to 39, yeah, how about 40? How about 50?
How many?
You want to go to 90?
How many people do you assume? How many people do you assume would be touched by that tax? Would be implicated?
Top 1%. Look at this number right here. Share of total income taxes paid.
Less.
The top 1% in this country pay 42.3%. The bottom 50% only pay 2.3%. So 150 million people are paying nothing in taxes.
Right.
And you want to keep the 1% paying more and more and
I think it's actually even less than 1%, to be honest with you. I think we're talking about 0.05%.
Sure, but let's tax them even more.
I specifically want to make it illegal to be almost as wealthy as you. Not quite, but a little bit more. Like I want to make it not illegal. You're not going to go to jail.
So nobody can be no billionaires. No billionaires in America.
Absolutely.
Sam,
100%.
Why? Don't you want America to be known for greatness, for innovation, for capitalism, for all the amazing things that we've done in this country?
My definition of
you want to go to like Nordic socialism.
My definition of greatness is different from yours.
We did have greatness and innovation in the 40s and 50s and 60s. We were the envy of the entire world back then. People were getting wealthy and making money. That was still a thing that was happening. Sam Seder isn't proposing something that never existed. He's bringing up decades where we had a top marginal rates near what he's proposing. It's not something that never existed at all. Things were going well in the country, and that's something that Sam Seder is trying to get across to Patrick Bet-David and his co-hosts. If you ask me, a top marginal tax rate of 90% is a bit excessive, just because of how the world has changed and how wealth can be accumulated these days. But for someone to have like $50 billion, it's completely unnecessary. $1 million to most people is really rich. $100 million to most people is really rich. Most people wouldn't be able to spend that money in a lifetime if they're being smart with their investments or how they spend. The times that they reference when they say "Make America Great Again" always kind of harkens back to when America had a strong middle class, and it feels like these days that cornerstone is being obliterated. But what do you think? Do you agree with Sam Seder's proposal of a top marginal tax rate of 90%? Or are you with Patrick Bet-David and his co-host in the camp that this seems absolutely insane? I want to hear from you in the comment section. I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves.